Welcome to Bookworthy, where we talk about the heart behind the books your kids are reading. On today's bonus episode, we are celebrating Christmas in July with children's author Sonia Anderson. Sonia writes from her home in Seattle, Washington, where she's also a wife, mother, and critique group coordinator of the Northwest Christian Writers Association. Apart from watching the boats go by on Puget Sound, Sonia enjoys getting to spy on kids reading as a daily part of her job as a librarian. Today, we're talking about her book, A Christmas Wish for Little Dala Horse. Welcome to Bookworthy, Sonia.
Thank you so much. I'm just delighted to be here today.
It's a pleasure to have you. Any excuse to put on my Christmas sweater, I will take that opportunity for certain.
I love it.
Well, to start us off, we'll do our random question of the week. And keeping with a Christmas theme, I thought we'd ask, what's the most memorable Christmas gift you've ever received?
Well, I guess I have to say my husband has given me two gifts that were really special, and they are kind of on the opposite spectrums of what you might expect. I used to teach in Japan, and the students gave me a beautiful pearl necklace as a goodbye gift, and the necklace was stolen. And for our 10th wedding anniversary that Christmas year, my husband replaced the pearl necklace.
Oh,
and that was so special. And then on the other side, he also presented me with a stack of 10 yellow-lined tablets of paper. And early on, like from Costco, one of those big packs, and early on in my writing, he did this, and it felt like a giant permission slip that he knew this was not a phase that was going to go away. And I had like all this paper now, because that's how I like to write drafts, is on yellow-lined paper. And so both gifts were just so thoughtful in really special ways.
Do sound very memorable, and I have my own yellow legal pads stack in my closet too. So
I love it.
I know how fun that is to receive blank pieces of paper.
Yes.
Well, Sonia, why don't you tell us a little bit about your inspiration behind A Christmas Wish for Little Dala Horse?
Well, in my job, I work as a librarian assistant, and I was checking in a stack of runaway gingerbread man stories. You know the ones, they've been around forever. And the kindergarten classes had been reading various ones. So there's like Runaway Dreidel and Runaway Matzo Ball and Runaway Tortilla. And so I'm going through all these, and I thought, there should be a Swedish one because I'm a Swedish immigrant family, from my great-grandparents, and Swedish traditions have been passed down the line, especially at Christmas time. And so I just started pondering it, and I wrote kind of pretty quickly a draft that was kind of a madcap thing about a peppercorn cookie, a Swedish version of like a gingerbread cookie. And it included a Dala horse in it that also ran away. My agent read it, and in 10 minutes she got back to me and said, "I'm Swedish. I would love to do a Swedish book." But when she read my story, she's like, "I feel like it's kind of tugging. It needs to be, we need to pick like this madcap version or the heartfelt, quiet version." And most of the time, publishers don't want something quiet. They think is, not going to sell. So I was just stunned when she said, "Let's go the quiet version. I think that'll be more unique." And she was 100% right. And as she always is. And Little Dala Horse kind of emerged through that, just a more wonderful story than I could ever have dreamed up on my own. Between Adria's feedback and my critique group and family, it just really morphed into something I never really could have dreamed up on my own.
It is a very sweet story, and there's nice little pockets of Swedish traditions in there. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the Swedish hints that are inside?
Yes, well, there's a few Swedish vocabulary words that are very simple, and they have cute tomten, these little Swedish people that are kind of, legend has it that they guard a family farm, protect the chickens from the foxes, that kind of thing. And they really require very little in their life. Like they want a bowl of rice pudding on Christmas Eve, and that kind of keeps them happy. But if you miss it, then they get very angry and cause all sorts of mischief, is kind of what the story goes. But so the illustrator put little tomten in the corners with holding a sign of the little Swedish words so kids can learn a little bit of Swedish. And also there's, the straw ornaments on the trees, and then the Swedish candelabras, some of the Swedish food like the peppercorn cookies, and especially the Santa Lucia celebration. The subtitle of the book is a St. Lucia celebration, and a Santa Lucia pageant, like my kids grew up doing at my church here in Seattle, is a major part of the story.
It is a major part, and I love how you kind of discover, someone who's not familiar with the St. Lucia pageant and those elements of Christmas traditions, kind of how the candelabras and candles and the wreaths of candles that has filtered into Christmas traditions and decorations, that it has what the source is. And I really love how you've done that.
Thank you.
And were you ever St. Lucia in the pageant growing up?
Not. I was never in one myself. It wasn't part of my church's background. It was in the same denomination, the Evangelical Covenant Church, which is founded from Swedish immigrants originally. But my church in Ohio, where I grew up, didn't celebrate it. They ended up celebrating it years later, and my mom was a major part of that. So, but every once in a while, she would want to do a Lucia thing at home. So, and a lot of Swedes do have like a little Lucia pageant or breakfast, at home, where the daughters of the family will dress in the long white robes with red sashes, and the eldest will have the crown of candles and carry a tray of saffron buns and coffee to the people in the house. And so we would do that occasionally.
Very neat. Now tell me a little bit about St. Lucia, if that's not something our listeners have heard of.
Right. Well, St. Lucia is actually an Italian young woman from centuries ago, and I'm not going to say which century because I will get it wrong here on the spot when I don't have it right in front of me. But from many, many years ago, where she she was young and engaged to be married, and her mother became extremely ill. And I have this in it like an author's note at the end, a little bit of her story, more than what I could fit into the book. But she prayed diligently for her mother and kind of made a vow to God that if God healed her mother, that she would give her dowry away to the poor. And her mother was healed, and she kept her vow. The legend says she brought food, carried trays of food to Christians in hiding that were being persecuted in Rome and Italy, in Sicily. She was from Sicily, but brought them food and risked her life doing so. Her fiance was extremely angry that she was doing this, and legend has it that he's the one that turned her into the authorities, and she was killed for this act of courage and kindness and generosity. And no one really knows how that story became such a part of Swedish tradition. There is another legend that says that there was a village across a lake that one winter was starving, and this young woman was seen in a long white gown and a crown of candles, which would keep Lucia's hands free so she could carry the trays and go into the catacombs or whatever with this crown of candles. But legend has it that there was a Lucia figure in the bow of a boat coming across the lake and saving the people of this Swedish village. And somehow, in this dark, wintry land, the idea of somebody coming with this hope on her head, this crown of candles lighting the way, really captured their imagination. And it's been celebrated now for many, many.
That's unique. I've always heard it as a Swedish tradition. I never known it had come from Italy and Sicily. And so that's really neat to kind of get a little depth on it.
Yeah.
Well, in this story, what do you hope to communicate to kiddos who read this book?
Well, in this story, this little Dala horse is newly carved. He doesn't know anything about the world, and everything he's learning is from this old horse that's been put into the shop to get his g repaired, and tells him kind of about the wonders of Yule, of Christmas, and of being loved and being given as a gift of the heart. When a soldier originally carved him years and years and years before, generations ago, and thanked the family he was quartered with by giving them this little horse, and that he taught then the son, this little boy in the family, how to carve, and he became the wood carver in the family, and then it's passed down. And as you read the story, it's each person in the story kind of gives and receives a gift of the heart. And my little Dala horse falls on the floor at the church and crushes an ear, and a nail scratches his paint, and he's not only not finished, he doesn't have his fancy Herbert painting, this Swedish painting that's so lovely. He's just plain, and now he's broken and scratched, and he's oh, nobody will ever love me now. And the little girl does love him and needs him as a friend. And I just really hope that children and adults alike reading this story will really come to know that God loves them, and they can give gifts of the heart, no matter who they are, no matter what their circumstance is, or, how unfinished, we are all unfinished, aren't we, on this side of heaven? But, how unfinished or even damaged they feel, they can still give and receive love. And so that's kind of the major theme of this story.
I love that. It's not what I expected walking into this story. And so coming to the end where they're at the pageant and the little horse has found his person, it's really sweet to be like, yes, we all want to be found and held and loved despite broken ears or scratched paint. And I love how it kind of comes around as the little girl gets to help make him special and paint him at the end too, as like, oh, in God's hands, we do become even more precious because when we allow him to work in our hearts and minds. And so I kind of love that element out of it too. Sonia, you were a librarian. Did you always want to be an author too?
Well, yes. And maybe every librarian has had that secret dream. But when I was little, and my mom sent this to me just a few years ago, so I have it in my possession, but I have a little piece of construction paper folded over into fours, into quarters, tied with a red piece of yarn. And on the front, it says Sonia's book with backwards letters. I was probably 5. Like, as soon as I could write my name, imagined myself being an author, and loved books. And on the inside, of course, is just like a drawing, an illustration. There's no other words, but it really just warms my heart because I know that just from an early age, I wanted to be an author. And then when I was in about the 2nd grade, the school held a contest for writers to talk about what Christmas means to me. And I wrote 2 versions. One was kind of madcap and did not get accepted. Isn't that ironic? And one was heartfelt and quiet, and that's the one that won the contest. And I got to read the story in front of the entire Christmas assembly of parents and kids and faculty. And from that moment on, I was hooked. And I was like, I just was always writing something, or especially in a journal. I always kept a journal growing up.
Very neat. Now, where did your writing journey begin? Because I know the love of books. You used to kind of talk about, that book when you're, made with that your mom gave you, but when did you kind of decide, okay, I'm actually going to do more than journal?
Well, I had kind of, I always talked about wanting to be a writer, and when I taught in Japan for 3 years at an international school for boys, and I was given the multi-faith class to teach. This was a Catholic school, and most of the kids were Catholic, but there was a Protestant group, and there was a parent request for a multi-faith group because there were also Jewish kids and Muslim kids and kids of no faith background. And I was the new teacher at the school, and so they said, she'll do it. I was asked to do this, so I had a very interesting couple of years of trying to find stories from all the different faith backgrounds that I could read, that resonated with things I could communicate with enthusiasm, like stories about patience or, something like that. So, and just kind of like what each religion was about, and music or, things like that from different faiths. So I learned a lot because I knew nothing before, doing this except for a little bit about Judaism and about Christianity. But what really spoke to me and like kind of started my writing journey was that every time I read a Bible story, the hand shot up from these kids with not a Christian background, and they asked me if that story wasn't a true story. And it really was so meaningful and impactful to me. And I started at that point praying about and thinking about stories and how could I help kids kind of navigate this diverse world and learn with respect about other faiths, and yet understand how Jesus is so uniquely our Savior and God with us. And so I came up with a kind of a character of an owl, and then didn't really, because owls are supposed to be wise. And so I kind of imagined a journey with this owl. And I didn't really do anything with that until I moved from Japan to Seattle, got married, and had our first child. And then I started reading children's books. And it was when she was in kindergarten that she had an argument on the playground with a Buddhist boy and a Jewish boy about which God is biggest. And we had just been going through a Moses class at Bible Study Fellowship. And my daughter knew, whose God was biggest. And she was having this argument on the playground. And I thought, all right, kids need a way to learn something about each other's backgrounds, because I live in a very diverse community and it's a wonderful collection of souls, and that I have the privilege of loving every single day from all over the world, every imaginable faith background. We have like 80 different languages represented in my school district.
Wow.
And so that was what sprung my original novel, Sophie's Quest, which is now out of print, sadly, but will come back someday. Is part of a 3-book series that I'm hoping to resurrect. But anyway, that's what really kicked it off. And 9/11, when the towers fell down and just there was so much extremist talk about Muslims. And I had these Muslim students in my school that I loved, and I was worried that they would just hear nonstop how evil they were, and I wanted to write something that would help people understand things that we could respect. They try to memorize their holy scriptures. Do we? And so I found things like that I could take my owl character, Sophie Topfeather, now, and take her on a journey. And so that's really what kicked it off, was that. And then I have not stopped ever since. And also played with picture books along the way, because when you're working on a big novel, it's kind of fun to have small projects that you can kind of finish and play with and have fun with, kind of like recess, it's like, and then lo and behold, I acquired an agent for picture books, Christian picture books, and that's really what got me writing picture books seriously, when she believed in me.
It is fun that those little projects kind of remind you that you can do this in a long project. You're like, all right, my ideas do have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Because when you're in the middle, you're like, is this ever going to end? When you're writing something
and will anybody ever read it?
Imposter syndrome is a real thing for certain. Well, very neat. Sonia, what is your favorite book?
Well, probably every one of your guests says the Bible, because that would hands down be my favorite book. But I think looking at my entire life and books that I've read and reread, the book Heidi by Johanna Spyri is really my favorite book of all time. I read an old copy of my mom's. My mom's name was Johanna. The author's name was Johanna Spyri. And so maybe I kind of locked onto it at first because of that, and it was my mom's book. But then my imagination was really inaugurated with this little girl's brave journey into the mountains with this grumpy grandfather. And I'm an Ohio girl. We had no mountains in sight. And so I wanted to see mountains. And my dad was a dentist, and he found a dental conference in Colorado and packed us all in the car, and we went to Colorado so Sonia could see mountains. And I think that really changed my life, because I live in Seattle, surrounded by mountains. And but more than just the mountains, like the way Heidi's love for others transforms everyone in the story was so powerful that I have just wanted to strive to, write the same kind of story that would transform lives ever since.
I love that. I love how stories do that. And there's always that one that just says, this is what I want to write. Like, this is the feeling I want the readers to have when they read what I write. And I love that for most of as myself as a writer and the writers that I talk to here on the podcast. It's lots of fun. Well, Sonia, what can we expect next from you?
Well, I have several picture books in the hopper with my agent, and hopefully one of those will soon have a contract. And also, I've always wanted to write something set in Japan after living there. So I have been working for years now on a novel set in Japan, and kind of, if you know Shogun, it's in the Shogun era in the 17th century. And I just won first place in a Cascade Christian Writers contest this summer for that novel. So it's a middle grade novel for ages 8 to 12. And I am just really hoping that there will be a publishing home for that book someday.
Very interesting. That's definitely, with the Shogun era and then just the cultural differences between the West and the East. It's, a good mixing pot for all kinds of antics and discovery.
Yes.
I hope that finds a home quickly, and then we can hear more about that soon.
Thank you.
Where can people find out more about you and your book, Sonia?
I have a website at soniaandersonbooks.com. and Sonia is spelled with a J. And there you can sign up for my newsletter. And then that's where you'll get the most up-to-date kind of personal information about book signings and events and updates on publishing and stuff like that. I don't send out that many, so you won't get bombed with emails.
There are those ones that you're like, oh, where's the unsubscribe button?
Right.
When they come too often, for certain.
Right.
We'll make sure to have those links in the show notes for our listeners to find easily and quickly.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Sonia, for joining me today.
It was a delight. And have a Merry Christmas in July.
That's right. And thank you for joining Sonia and me on this bonus episode of the Bookworthy podcast. Check the show notes for any books or links we discussed, and let us know in the comments what is the most memorable Christmas gift you have received. Be sure to like and subscribe to discover more great books together. Happy reading!